Hi, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rural Talk Radio Network, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host or station. Folks, I have with me today such a phenomenal guest. I'm going to tell you about my guest who wrote such an awesome book. Dr. Beth Kurland, that's Kurland, is a clinical psychologist with 3 decades of experience. She is also a TEDx and public speaker, a mind-body coach, and an author of 3 award-winning books. Dr. Kurland is also the creator of the Well-Being Toolkit online program. I highly recommend for you to visit bethkurland.com because the information and the resource that Dr. Beth Kurland is phenomenal, and I highly recommend you listening to the TEDx talk, which I found very, very inspiring for me. And Dr. Beth Kurland is author and writer of You Don't Have to Change Everything. You don't have to change everything. Let me get that right. 6 ways to shift your vantage point, stop striving for happy, and find true well-being. Folks, I have to tell you this. I'm always honest with you. This book helped me so much at a very difficult time. I had just lost my mother. I had such emotions running through me, and this book helped me through that time, and I highly recommend this book. I even showed it to my own psychologist, and yes, I go see a psychologist because I need support, and he loved the title, and I just think this book is totally awesome. And I want to welcome Dr. Beth Kurland to Chatting with Betsy.
Oh, thank you so much for that amazing introduction and kind of sharing all of that. I'm excited to be here and really looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. Before I forget, Dr. Beth, I just want to read a little bit from your book. And folks, I want you to hear this, and why I chose to read this is because it was so powerful for me. And I know a lot of you out there are either losing your loved ones to some kind of illness or you have lost a loved one, and you're wondering, who am I? What do I do now? And where do I go from here? I asked myself the same questions. So I want to read you this because it was very powerful. This is from page 299. While many people are familiar with the term post-traumatic stress, fewer people are familiar with the term post-traumatic growth, which is when someone emerges from a traumatic experience with personal or spiritual growth, a new appreciation of life, an ability to see new possibilities for their life, and a greater awareness of their personal strengths. Is there a loss in your life in which you have gone on to find a meaning and purpose beyond this loss, or perhaps even because of this loss? If you lost someone close to you in your life, how might their essence or spirit live on in you in some way? What legacy have they left behind that continues to bring life and love to you and others? Wow. That is right there, folks, by the book. I'm telling you, I was crying when I read that, Dr. Beth. Not out of sadness, but because it meant so much to me, because this show is a result of my husband, Matt, who had early onset Alzheimer's. And how I became a show host is because I went in my car and raised awareness. This all has to do with Matt, and you just brought that home to me in such a powerful way. So I want to thank you. I wish I could hug you in person, but I'm sending you a hug.
I feel it. I feel it through the phone here. Yeah, wow. I mean, what an amazing, legacy for you to really create the show, out of what you went through and just be able to share with others in the way that you have. And, I think we all have probably, in one way or another, just experienced loss in life. It's such an inevitable part of our life. And, while the book is certainly, it doesn't just focus on that. It's really about, how we cope with the ups and downs of, all of these different range of human emotions that we experience. I know for me that certainly this book grew out of at least some piece of it, my own experience with loss, with losing my mother when I was 15. And I think it was really not until quite a bit later, at least into my 20s, and then when I really had kids and became a mother, that I think I truly and fully processed, all of that grief and sadness. And I certainly have had the gift of some wonderful therapists throughout my lifetime as well, and just, different things that I have found so helpful in my own life in, how do we meet and greet whatever those difficult emotions are that we experience on a regular basis. And then in working with my patients for over 30 years, I feel like it's been such a privilege. I've learned so much from sitting with so many people and just really, I think more than anything, seeing the resilience of the human spirit, in that passage that you read. I just feel like, time and again through sitting with so many of my patients and just, all kinds of different, whatever, situations, challenges and traumas and losses and, just life's day-to-day things that gets thrown at us. And nonetheless, there's just, I think, this amazing resilience of the human spirit that
absolutely
can really kind of help guide us through. Yeah.
Yes, and I always ask, what motivated you to write this book? Let me ask that before I go on. My mind, I think I might have ADHD. My mind goes in 1,000 different directions. So I'll ask you, what motivated you to write this wonderful book? And I'm going to say this now, Dr. Beth. I can picture this being a bestseller. I hope it does. Because this should be in every social worker, I think high school, maybe middle school, but high school, college, this should be in everyone's library. But go ahead, I digress.
Your kind words, and I hope it certainly reaches as many people as possible. But and I'm so touched truly by, just to hear that it was so helpful for you at a difficult time for you that you were going through. And, that just means so much to me because you never know when you're writing, right? It's just such a solitary process. And you really often don't know how it lands for people. So I really appreciate you sharing that. But in terms of why I wrote the book, I think it grew out of some different things. One is, I had written several books before this, and I feel like each book I write, and then I reflect. And I had actually, after before I wrote this book, but the previous book, after that, I kept a file on my computer, and I think I called it Tools for Life. And I just started jotting down all of the things that I had found helpful and transformative in my own life, the different tools and strategies and practices that I've used with my patients over the years that have really been most helpful for them, things I've learned from so many wonderful other psychologists and spiritual teachers, out in the world. So I had this file that I was just writing these things down, and I didn't really have any particular goal at that point of turning it into a book. And then at the same time, I was also taking some writing workshops, which were really wonderful, and we were given these writing prompts and just allowed to, write whatever emerged. And so I had all of these little personal vignettes that I had been collecting over a short period of time that really spoke to some of the deepest things in me. That, again, it wasn't like consciously I'm going to sit down and write about this topic, but that these things just began to pop out of me. And then the pandemic hit, and so I was in a fairly, I guess, unusual situation, I think, for a psychologist, in that I was sitting with all of my patients, and we were collectively, going through, whatever they were dealing with was so directly, that we all were dealing with, right? Just that, especially the early stages of the fear and the uncertainty, and really not knowing, where all this was going, and the anxiety. And for myself, my husband for some time in there was a frontline worker, and so like waking up in the middle of the night with this kind of anxiety and panic and all of that, and so in the midst of that, I guess what struck me is that even when we may not be able to find, quote, happiness, which is part of that subtitle of Stop Striving for Happy, that nonetheless we can cultivate well-being. And we can do that in these ways that I talk about, of really these 6 different shifts of vantage point. But the book really came out of this, I guess all of that, and just weaving together these personal vignettes that I had written, and thinking about all of these tools and things that have been helpful for patients over the years and for myself. And really addressing this question of how can we find well-being even in the midst of the ups and downs of our life. And I think that's really what it speaks to.
Definitely. And what I love about your book, Dr. Beth, is that you share yourself. You show your own struggles and share your struggles, and people can relate to that. Because so many times, people think, oh, well, they're a psychologist, psychiatrist, they have it all together. They can't relate to me. And you talk about the struggles that you had and the feeling of not good enough. I'm like, oh, I can relate to that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Dr. Beth Kurland feels that way. I feel that way. I can relate to this woman. She's down to earth. And I love that you, at the end of each chapter, that you have questions for reflection and exercises, and it's just a book I think that everyone can relate to. And what another thing that I love about it, I just love so many things about your book, is that I came across to me in my own opinion, I don't have to suppress how I feel. I was suppressing hostility. I was suppressing anger that I had towards my mom. And, I know that might sound terrible to some people, but because of what I grew up with, I had these feelings. And you're like saying in your book, greet them, sit down with them. And here's different vantage points at how to look at it. That just hit home to me, like you would not believe. Because I was suppressing, that saying, what you resist persists.
Yeah.
And so when I sat down, and when I sat down with the hostility, and I even talked to my mom, okay, Mom, I feel hostile towards you because of what, ABC. Do you know I felt better? And thank you. Thank you
for sharing that. That's really powerful. And I think that and I write about this a lot in the book, that we are biologically wired, and I think many of us, myself included, socially and culturally conditioned, kind of where the time and place I grew up, to
yes.
To push away our feelings, to avoid, to suppress, to some extent.
Yes.
From an evolutionary perspective, that was, a survival strategy for our ancestors, to seek what's pleasant, to avoid what's painful. But that's translated into our modern lives into, avoiding our own internal experiences, not just the external, ones that are unpleasant, but the internal ones. And so I think so many of us can relate to that, myself included, for sure. Like I said, with my own grief, it really wasn't until, later in life, and really when I became a mother, that I think I fully was able to really sit and be with, a lot of feelings that I had pushed away. So there is something very powerful, and I've been always drawn to different mind-body practices and to mindfulness, probably at least since college, I would say. And there's something that's so powerful when we can learn to turn towards what's there with a kind of curiosity, to be able to hold a space for it, for our own inner experiences, our own inner emotions, because that's not something that we're typically taught how to do.
And in fact, very true.
Yeah.
It's very true. I grew up, in the 60s, 70s. I'm 66. And my dad, because of his background, World War II vet, he grew up in an abusive home. Crying was seen as a weakness. You did not cry. You tried not to cry because you were made fun of. Even in school, the teachers would make fun of you for crying. And I was a sensitive child, and it was hard. And, and my mom also grew up with, you don't show your emotions. And it's difficult. When my brother died, and I suggested grief counseling for my mother, she bit my head off. She's, comes from that time. I don't share my emotions. I don't share how I feel. It's no one's business how I feel. And I felt so bad that she's struggling, and yet she won't seek support. And I just want to tell the audience, the reason why I say all the time, and I'm a big mental health advocate, that I seek support, because I want other people, encourage other people to seek support. It's okay if you're struggling, and it's okay to say, I need help, and to have these feelings. Go ahead, Dr. Beth.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think that's such an important message. And I think, what a gift to your listeners, right, to really be able to share that and encourage that. But I think there is certainly is a stigma, at least, and I'm in the same generation as you, kind of growing up, or our parents and that kind of thing. And I think it's, thankfully, that is changing. But even so, there can be a lot of resistance about asking for help, or just feeling like I should, like a lot of people come in my door feeling like, what's wrong with me that I'm feeling this way? I should be feeling happy, or I should be feeling this or that. And so there's this tendency that we have to think, that something wrong, something missing, not enough, like you said earlier, or I need to, fix myself. And I think, sometimes those feelings stop people from also seeking help. And, what I certainly hope when people come in my door is, really getting a sense of, you are not alone, that, this is just part of our human condition, and we all struggle in different ways with whatever that is. And, and I have spoken openly on the podcasts, and I mentioned earlier, but for myself, I certainly found therapy to be essential, at many different points in my own life. So, yeah, I think that is certainly an important message of being able to reach out in different ways, and help can come in lots of different forms for people. But, yeah.
Yes, and that's another reason why I just love your book, because you admit, I went for support. Saw a psychologist or, whoever you were seeing.
Yeah.
And I said, that is such a great message in this book, because here, you think people have it all together, and because of their profession, and they don't. Years ago, I was in my son, who has a cognitive disability, was in a group therapy, like to learn social skills, and one of the mothers was a psychologist. And she said that her son could unravel her nervous system in 5 minutes, and that she was taking medication for depression. And I said, wow, you are struggling, and you're a psychologist. What does that say about me? It made me feel good, because I wasn't alone. And that's one of the things I say so often in the show, Dr. Beth, is that we all think we're alone in our struggles, but we're not. Yeah. We just don't want to say it openly because we're afraid about being judged. People are afraid of being judged. And I hear this so often in various support groups. I have to be strong. I was told when my husband was dying and Josh and I were crying, be strong. I hate that term. And I, very blunt, I'm a Jersey girl, and I said, don't tell us to be strong. We have a right to cry. My husband, Josh's dad, is dying. How dare you say to be strong when we've been strong?
And I think there's such a misconception or just that, even that languaging around the idea that somehow crying equals not being strong, that just doesn't make sense to me, in my experience, that, being able to allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling takes tremendous strength and courage to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And well-being is possible, which you talk about in your book, and without having to change. Like, we have our feelings and emotions, and I love the different vantage points. The compassionate parent, I love that one. I mean, I loved all of them.
Yeah.
And the mirror view, to look in the mirror and look at your strengths, because a lot of times we don't see ourselves as having strengths. I used to see crying as a weakness, but being sensitive, which I've been my whole life, is actually a strength. I feel for people. I could relate to people. What are I know it's probably hard because they're all like your babies, your children, but what are your favorite points, your vantage points, vantage shift points in the book?
They are all kind of like, each one has their own place in my heart, I guess. But
yes.
But I would say two of them maybe, stand out if I have to kind of name two. But so one is what the one you named, the compassionate parent view. That one has been truly one of the most transformative for me personally and for my patients. And just to kind of quickly summarize what that means. Often, if you think about, and I use this example just to try to give people a little bit of a sense of this, but if you imagine a small child who is feeling sad and disappointed because something they really wanted to do, got canceled, something like that. And that a parent might respond to that child in one of three ways. They might completely ignore that child and just let the child kind of, flounder in their own distress on their own. The second response, maybe the parent tells the child, hey, cut it out. Stop whining. Stop your complaining. I don't want to hear that. Wipe away your tears and go along. And the third response might be that the child, the parent sits down next to the child and puts an arm around the child and says, I'm sorry that this thing got canceled for you. That must, understandably be really disappointing. And I'm here with you. Let's figure out, how we can help get through this, right? And so I think most of us would probably say, yeah, given the choice, we would prefer that third response. But here's the thing. We often treat ourselves like that first or second, example, that we can ignore our own feelings. We disconnect from them. Or we might tell ourselves to, hey, cut it out. I shouldn't be feeling this way. What's wrong with me that I'm feeling this way? Kind of go into that more self-critical narrative or self-judgment. And I think it's a lot harder for most of us, at least certainly nothing I was ever taught, in school or otherwise, right, of how to be with those more unpleasant or difficult emotions in a compassionate way towards myself, of just really being able to be that kind of compassionate parent, give that same response to myself when I'm struggling. And so the compassionate parent view is really all about how we can do that, how we can begin to dip our toe into that and start to bring little practices, ways of doing that in our lives. And when we can meet our own distress with that kind of, or it could be, and for many people, understandably, they have not always had compassionate parents, maybe have not had that experience, but that's, I just use that term, but it could be, you could think about a compassionate friend. You don't have to have had a compassionate parent to take this point of view. But, just in the presence of a compassionate other, there's a kind of emotional alchemy that happens. And we probably all experience that maybe in some way, shape, or form, sitting with a good friend, that kind of thing. And it's really learning how to bring that kind of care and that meeting and greeting of whatever's here in a non-judgmental way with ourselves. So that is I could certainly talk more about it, but that's the compassionate parent view. I'll pause there. And
that is awesome. And the mirror view.
Yeah,
I love that one.
Yeah.
I loved it all.
That was my other one that was the other one I was going to say, because that, I think, also has, they all have, I think, a big impact in different ways, but this one has truly been really transformative, especially in my work with people. So the mirror view is typically when we look in the mirror, whether, and could be the real mirror, but also the metaphorical mirror, we see often what we don't like. We see what's wrong, what's missing. We see the places where we feel like, I messed up, or, I failed that, or I did this wrong. And, we could go through a given day even, and maybe there's, one mistake we make along the way, and then 10 things we do well, and we often tend to focus on that one negative thing. And this is part of the negativity bias of our brain, and we are wired to some degree, in this way. But what if we were to look in a different kind of mirror, and this mirror was to reflect back our strengths and the inner qualities that are already here, that we already have, and it also reflects back to us the things that we're doing well, the little choices and steps in each day that are moving us in the direction of well-being. And so looking in this different kind of a mirror really begins to change things. And I share in the book that I had the privilege of working with Dr. Robert Brooks, who at that time was at McLean Hospital where I did my internship. It's back many, many years ago, although Bob and I still keep in touch, and he continues to do amazing work. But what he really taught me at that time, this was a time when in psychology when there was a lot of emphasis on, quote, psychopathology, kind of finding what's wrong with people and diagnosing that and so forth. And what Bob really taught me was that change comes about not by finding what's wrong and fixing it, but by finding what's right and strengthening it.
I love that.
Yeah, that was just such a powerful way of looking at things. And that's really, in many ways, where this mirror view grew out of. But Bob used to talk about Dr. Brooks. He would talk about helping children find their islands of competence, that we all have islands of competence. If we could help children find their islands of competence and really strengthen that and bring that to light, then, kids, and he was working at that time with kids who had really significant behavior problems and things like that. And when, he helped parents and teachers find kids' islands of competence and strengthen that, the kids' behaviors changed. Things really started to turn around in some very significant ways. So, when we can hold up this kind of mirror for ourselves and really find and see all the things that are working, and I have to also just put a shout out to Rick Hansen, if anybody is aware of his, books and teachings, because he's been a big inspiration for me as well. But, when we can really pay attention to what's working well and how to strengthen it, it can really be so supportive for us through the ups and downs of our life.
That is so true. And folks, if you want to hear the other vantage points, buy the book. I'm not giving it all away. I've got to leave a little mystery here. And I just, this book is so phenomenal because, and you're a phenomenal writer, how to accept, meet, and greet our emotions is really what is threaded through your book. And that's one of the many things I loved about it. I'm just going to give a quick story. One of the reasons I was seeing a social worker after Matt died, and then, of course, COVID happened, and I actually see my psychologist, telemed. But what drove me to see a psychologist, I thought I needed more help, is because, Dr. Beth, I thought I should be better by now. I think it was 3 years after my husband died, and I said I should be feeling better because from Thanksgiving to New Year's is horrible for me. And now I've learned to accept that, and your book also helped me with this. I've learned to accept this is how I'm going to feel at this time. This is when Matt was dying. This is the trauma that we went through. These memories are going to pop up in my head. There's no way it's going to stop. And I have learned to accept that that is my new normal, and I don't like to use the word normal, but I don't know what other word to use. And so now, this past Christmas season, 23, I dealt with it better. I dealt with it better because I knew that this is how I was going to feel, and then reading your book, like a few months later, really was like the icing on the cake for me. That it is okay for me to feel this way for those weeks, and I don't have to change it. I accept it now. I don't have to change it. I love that. Thank you, Dr. Beth Kurland.
Oh, thank you. And that's again, such a powerful way that you shared that, but just this idea of acceptance that I think often we fight against our emotions, or we feel like we need to get rid of. And sometimes what we really just need to do is add in something, right? When you add in acceptance to whatever else is there, there's a kind of emotional alchemy that begins to happen. And so, yeah, just by you being able to accept that it's okay that some of this, inner turbulence is present and it's understandable, making space for that, allowing for that, I think, there's more ease there.
Yes, and I think it's so important to let our children, no matter what their age, vent and express their feelings, in a constructive way. And I just want to say to the audience, if your child is struggling, if you yourself are struggling, please seek support. Contact your primary care doctor in your area for referrals. And if you're really struggling, call in the U.S., call 911. No, that's not it. It's 988. Excuse me, 988. I'm thinking 911, that's the emergency, 988. But if you are in a violent situation, then call 911. I just want to thank you, Dr. Beth Kurland, for coming on. What would you like the reader? There's so much to take away from your book. What would you like the reader to take away from your book? If you could narrow it down to one thing. There's many things.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah,
so much.
I guess what I would say is that I believe that, well-being is an innate capacity that we all have, but it can be hard to access sometimes, and it's not something that we typically learn how to do. And when we can learn to shift our vantage point in some of these ways that I share, it becomes like this portal into a deep well of well-being that is already there. And so I guess, I would want people just to take away the message that we really have so much already within us if we can just kind of find the tools to help unlock that. And it's not about needing to change or fix ourselves. Sometimes it's about just needing to learning, to drop in and be present with and be able to really find, deep inner peace and well-being with what's here.
Absolutely. Dr. Beth Kurland, you are the woman. You are so amazing. It was such a pleasure and honor talking to you. I'm so glad I received your book. Where can people purchase your book? You don't have to change everything. 6 ways to shift your vantage point, stop striving for happy, and find true well-being. Where can they find that book?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, it's on, any of the major places where people might go and buy books online. They can also come to my website, bethkurland.com, where there's also a link to the book there and lots of free resources for people to, use if they like. Yeah. And I love to hear from people as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. And I highly recommend folks going on the website. It will be in the blog that Jeannie White, who is station manager, writes and produces the show. So thank you, Jeannie. Thank you again, Dr. Beth Kurland, for writing this awesome book, for helping so many people, myself included. I hope people run to their computers, order this book, or go to their local bookstore, because this book is for anyone who is struggling. I think this is a beneficial book, and that will help support you even when you seek support from a social worker or a psychologist. My psychologist loved the name of the book. He loved the title. I showed him the book. I said, "Did you ever hear Dr. Beth Kurland?" I'm going to interview her. This is her book. And I just think that it's a wonderful book. And if you are struggling, I'm telling you, this book will help you. It helped me. If it helped me, I know it's going to help other people. And I can't thank you enough. I do hope it becomes a bestseller because I'm that strong about it.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure and privilege to be on your show.
Oh, well, you're welcome. The honor and privilege is mine, believe me. And I want to thank Leonard Caldwell, who's CEO of Perpetual Talk Radio, makes this all possible. And thank you all for listening, subscribing. Please share this podcast to help other people. Dr. Beth Kurland is an excellent resource, phenomenal resource, and I'm here to help you have a better life. And by providing people like Dr. Beth Kurland on my show to help you have a better life. And so please share this show so other people can know about Dr. Beth Kurland. And I have many different types of guests that are great resources. And you never know who I'll have on my show. And it is free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple, Amazon Music, to name just a few. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we all need it now more than ever. And if you want to follow me, I am Betsy Wurzel, Wurzel, on Facebook. And if you're looking for a support group, I have #KICK, Alzheimer's Ass Movement. Everyone is welcome. And that is it for today. Thank you again, Dr. Beth Kurland. I have to give a shout-out, because I forget, to Lisa Warren, who arranged this interview. President Lisa Warren, PR, wonderful publicist, top-notch if you're looking for one. Lisa Warren is I highly recommend Lisa Warren as a publicist. So I want to thank you, Lisa. And
I'll second that.
So wonderful, top-notch publicist. And I work with many, but Lisa is definitely very, very excellent, I want to say, in her field. And just to give a shout-out, because Lisa sends me wonderful clients and is a big part of the show. So big shout-out thanks to Lisa Warren. And that's all I have to say today, folks. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Perpetual Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Chat with you soon. Bye-bye.